Friends, I'm just gonna give it to you straight. This mother put her child into a microwave. But here's my question. How serious is postpartum depression? I truly believe a support system with a new child is essential, and without it, raising an infant can be near impossible. This brings me on to Kai Young. I'm going to start with her background and then get into the events that unfolded. Make sure you listen to the very end for a monumental twist. Trust me. Kai Young, who was 29 years old at the time of the killing, was born in the United States and is of Hmong descent. She lived in Sacramento with her husband, Chi Lo, their three young sons, who were aged 4, 7, and 8 at the time, and their daughter Mirabelle, who was born on January the 22nd, 2011. She was very happy to have a daughter, and by all family accounts, she loved and cherished Mirabelle. Chi's brother, Val Lo, also lived with the family, and Yang's mother, Chua Ku Yang, stayed with them periodically. Forgive me if I butchered these names, by the way. Yang's relatives lived nearby and helped when needed. So it seems, with my theory of postpartum depression, she certainly had the support system she needed. Yang worked as an office worker while pregnant with Mirabelle, and after Mirabelle's birth, she worked at home preparing checks over the internet for a few hours a day. Chi was a long haul truck driver. Typically, he was on the road during the week and at home on the weekends, but at times he would be gone for up to 14 days at a time. When Yang was younger, she began having seizures at age 13 or 14, and by the time of the killing, had experienced more than 100 seizures in her lifetime. She took medication to control her seizures, but she did not believe the medication helped. According to Yang, during her seizures, she lost consciousness, fell down, and afterward did not remember what happened. Yang's husband Chi had witnessed many of her seizures. Her body and extremities would shake, her eyes would roll into her head, and she would drool while making moaning or groaning noises. She bit her tongue 90% of the time and sometimes lost bladder control. In Chi's experience, Yang did not walk around or do anything during her seizures, which lasted for at least 2 to 5 minutes. After a seizure, she had very low energy, was slow to get up, and seemed dazed and confused. Normally, she would go somewhere and lie down, and it would take 3 to 4 hours to regain her senses. Yang's mother, Chua, testified some of Yang's seizures were more intense than others. When she had a fall down seizure, she would fall to the ground and shake, clench both fists, and bite her tongue. Yang would get up after taking a moment, and the amount of time would vary. Chua would help her to her room, and she was back to normal after sleeping for 30 to 60 minutes. Other witnesses to Yang's seizures noted that Yang often appeared weak, confused, disoriented, or exhausted after a seizure. During that time, she could not follow simple commands and she could not have completed any complicated tasks such as working on a computer or driving. She would gradually regain consciousness. Her recovery time appeared to depend on the severity of the seizure. One witness testified that paramedics arrived probably 4 or 5 minutes after Yang would have a seizure, and on the occasion, the witness observed Yang was able to answer their questions but did not understand why the paramedics were there. Yang's sister in law testified that Yang's seizures were not always the same. She observed Yang having two seizures that caused her to fall to the ground, clench her fists, and shake for 2 to 3 minutes. You see, Yang was involved in two car crashes due to her seizures, the most recent of which occurred only a week before Mirabelle's death. She recalled having a flashback while driving before awakening in the hospital. So that gives you an insight into Yang and the seizures she experienced because she said that what took place happened because of her seizures. Now I'm going to get into the murder. March the 17th, 2011 began normally. Chi was out of town working. Chua arrived late the previous evening to help Yang care for Mirabelle because Yang needed time to apply for public benefits that afternoon. Yang fed Mirabelle at approximately 5 a.m. Yang accessed a check on the internet for her job at 6 a.m. She and Mirabelle got out of bed at approximately 7 to 7:30 a.m. She changed Mirabelle's diaper because the baby was crying. Yang brought Mirabelle to Chua so she could run an errand. When she returned home, Yang yelled at the boys to quit playing video games and get ready for school. Chua walked the two older boys to school and worked in the yard upon returning home. Yang prepared food for her youngest son. Chua came inside at 10 a.m. and changed Mirabelle's diaper. Yang's youngest son played with Mirabelle, who was laying on a pillow on the floor, and Yang yelled at him for playing too roughly with the baby. She told him to take a shower. Yang began working on her computer. She checked on her youngest son and yelled at him for spilling water after his shower. Chua put Mirabelle in her bouncy chair and cooked breakfast. Yang continued to work on the computer. Mirabelle started to cry, so Yang gave her a bottle as Mirabelle was a bottle fed baby. Mirabelle continued to cry, so Yang gave her a pacifier and Mirabelle slept for a few minutes. Mirabelle was crying more than normal that morning. Chua testified Mirabelle was a little fussy, but it did not concern her. She testified that Yang did not ever say she was stressed, overworked, or frustrated. He called her from the road the morning of the killing during a break and spoke with her for at least an hour, possibly two, which was not unusual. She did not mention that the baby was crying or otherwise acting strangely. They spoke of routine matters and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They ended their call at some point before noon. Mirabelle began crying again as Yang and Chua ate. After they finished eating, Yang put Mirabelle back in her bouncy chair and made her another bottle. Chua resumed her work in the yard. Val Lo, the brother, who testified that Mirabelle generally wasn't a quiet baby and had times when she cried, heard normal crying from Mirabelle between 1 and 1:30 p.m. He clarified that she cried for a minute or two at that time, which was not unusual. Val left the house at approximately 1:55 p.m. to pick up Yang's two older sons from school. He saw Yang working at the computer as he left. He did not see or hear Mirabelle. Computer records showed that Yang worked on multiple checks between 1:10 p.m. and 1:58 p.m. After Val left at approximately 1:55 p.m., Yang was alone inside the house with Mirabelle while Chua worked in the yard outside. Yang was interviewed multiple times by law enforcement after the baby's death and provided them with information about what happened while he was alone with the baby. These interviews were presented as evidence against her at trial. She told the detectives she gave Mirabelle the bottle again and then the pacifier. She noticed Mirabelle's eyes were moving back and forth like she was looking at a fly, but there was nothing there. Mirabelle rejected her pacifier and was crying, so Yang picked her up and held her and she stopped crying. Then, Yang's head started pounding, followed by a flash of white light or flashback. She woke up with Mirabelle lying next to her in the bedroom or in the front room. She believed she had a seizure because she wet herself and bit her tongue. She did not remember anything that had happened during the seizure. She noticed Mirabelle was red in the face, was stiff, and was not breathing. Crying, Yang brought Mirabelle to Chua, whom she thought was in the kitchen. When asked why she did not look for Va instead, Yang confirmed that although she did not remember him leaving that day, she remembered him returning to the house after she had found Chua, and she knew Va had been away because he always leaves to go pick up her older sons. After she awoke from the seizure, she was scared and just wanted to find her mom because that's how she reacted. At that time, Chua was returning to the house from the yard. She testified that when she reached the stoop, Yang opened the door holding Mirabelle, who wore pajamas and was wrapped in a blanket. Yang said Mirabelle was sick and they needed to take her to the hospital. Chua saw that Yang's face was flush. Her body was sweaty, her pants were wet around her thighs, and her tongue was bitten, so she could not speak clearly. Chua unzipped Mirabelle's pajamas and she saw Mirabelle had burn marks on her chest, her skin was peeling off her chest, and her body was hot to the touch. Yang started to peel off Mirabelle's skin near the top of the closure of her pajamas, but Chua slapped her hand away. When Va returned to the house from picking up the boys from school, the front door was open and Yang and Chua were standing 5 feet inside the house. Chua was holding Mirabelle. Yang said something bad had happened to the baby and Chua said Yang might have had a seizure. Yang and Va discussed taking Mirabelle to the hospital. Chua told him to call 911, which he did at 2:09 p.m. On the 911 call, which is played for the jury, Va repeated what Chua had told him, that Yang had a seizure and dropped the baby and probably fell on her. During the call, Yang complied with Va's instructions from the dispatcher to put Mirabelle on the sofa and to perform mouth to mouth. Va could not recall whether Yang appeared disoriented, but she answered his questions. Nothing suggested to Va that Yang was recovering from a seizure, although he thought a seizure was the most likely explanation because Yang was a good mother who loved her children and would never harm them on purpose. First responders arrived at 2:16 p.m. Brandon Gaub, a firefighter and paramedic, entered the house at 2:17 p.m. and saw Yang kneeling next to Mirabelle on the couch. He asked Yang to move out of the way and she complied. Gaub asked what happened to Mirabelle and someone in the room responded, "I don't know." Someone said Yang had a seizure and mentioned falling on a space heater. He did not formally assess Yang, but nothing he observed from his limited interaction with her suggested that she suffered a seizure. Firefighter and emergency medical technician Jennifer Ertel testified Yang said she had a seizure while working on the computer and she dropped Mirabelle onto a heater. When pressed, Yang repeated her explanation. Yang then said she did not know what happened. Officer Bora later interviewed Ertel at the scene, and she said Yang told her over and over that she had a seizure and did not know what happened. Yang was calm, alert, standing, talking, and making eye contact. She did not appear to Ertel to be confused or disoriented. Police officers arrived at 2:23 p.m., at which Mirabelle was pronounced dead. Officer Shippen interviewed Yang at 2:25. Yang told Shippen what she did that day before her seizure. That she had a history of seizures, that she believed she had a seizure at approximately 1:30 p.m., but she could not remember what happened. She did not appear disoriented and appeared to understand and appropriately respond to his questions. To be fair, if she seemed normal and the police officers are thinking, well, you didn't have a seizure, it could be that she has had seizures her whole life. Her acting calmly after the fact was just something normal. She got used to it. They said she appeared fairly calm and did not appear weak. He testified that it was possible her calm demeanor was due to shock. Then, a detective found a pacifier in the microwave oven. Maribel died of thermal injuries resulting from overexposure to microwave radiation in a microwave oven. She had second and third degree burns on approximately 56% of her body and suffered severe internal burns. The burn patterns were consistent with burns from a microwave oven and suggested that Yang placed Mirabelle in the oven lengthwise and on her back. A microwave oven expert estimated Mirabelle was in the oven for over 2 to 3 minutes at a minimum, and although an exact estimate was impossible, his best estimate was at least 5 minutes. It would take 2 to 3 minutes in the microwave oven to cause the injuries that killed Mirabelle, but the resulting burns would have taken longer. Detective Thomas Schrum interviewed Yang later on the date of the killing, the recording of which was played for the jury. Yang stated she had no memory of what happened because her seizures caused her to fall down and not remember events. Yang believed she had a seizure because she bit her tongue, wet herself, and could not remember what happened. Shroom testified that he didn't see blood or a fresh wound on Yang's tongue, did not smell urine, and did not notice that Yang's pants were wet. Yang denied she had burned the baby using the stove or the microwave, but she also responded that she did not know when Shroom posited that she put Mirabelle in the microwave when she had a seizure, adding that when she had a seizure, she could not remember what happened. She later agreed with Shroom that she could not have had a seizure because she would have fallen down. She repeatedly denied that she was stressed, frustrated, or angry at Mirabelle for crying. At the close of this interview, where at times Yang responded to questions in what seemed a confused manner, detectives told her she should go see a doctor. She responded that she would, but she had trouble responding to their questions as to where she would go, telling them instead that it's after my seizure, my brain just keeps hurting for a couple of hours before it goes back to normal. Detectives later interviewed Yang and Chua together. When asked why Yang killed Mirabelle, mother and daughter mentioned spirits and later clarified that spirits referenced possession by her seizure, not that spirits made her do it. On March the 18th, Detective Brian D. Donda and Shroom interviewed Yang. Yang said she picked up Mirabelle and gave her a pacifier at approximately 1 p.m. She experienced a flashback and had a seizure a few seconds later. She did not remember anything that happened until approximately 2 p.m. She was with the baby in the bedroom when she awoke and she could smell urine. When Yang noticed Mirabelle's face was injured, she ran from the bedroom into the front room and through the kitchen. On March the 22nd, Detective Hans Peter Merton interviewed Yang. Yang told Merton she generally ends up on the floor after a seizure and she lies there until she has enough energy to get up. Her family has never told her she does anything unusual after a seizure. Yang said that Mirabelle did not typically cry much, but she was crying more than normal that morning. She repeatedly denied being frustrated by Mirabelle's crying, but she agreed with Merton that she was a little bit frustrated because Mirabelle would not fall asleep and she had work to do. On March the 18th, Chi, the husband, spoke with Yang at the police station. This conversation was recorded. The conversation was in Hmong and was later translated into English. A translated transcript of the conversation was used by the prosecutor to refresh Chi's recollection of the conversation during his trial testimony, but it was not admitted into evidence. He agreed with the prosecutor that Yang told him at the police station, "The spirit called me, so I had a seizure," and that she fell on the baby, possibly on the heater. He said Yang did not remember what happened. She said that before the seizure, Mirabelle was moving her eyes back and forth, looking at something, was crying, and was spitting out her pacifier. She told him, "A spirit and demon together." He said the term Yang used is difficult to translate into English. She first testified that Yang saw a Caucasian demon or spirit outside staring at her and the baby through the window at a different time when she saw Mirabelle's eyes moving back and forth, but later agreed with the prosecutor that it was at the same time. Yang told him the demon or spirit was walking around outside of the house and wanted the baby. He agreed Yang did not say the spirit made her do anything and that she had no history of talking about spirits or demons. Chi clarified on cross examination that he did not interpret Yang's statements as attempting to place blame for the killing on the Caucasian. Rather, Chi agreed Yang's discussion of spirits or demons was her attempt to piece together an explanation for what happened. He said that some people in Hmong culture believe that epilepsy is the spirit invading the body, or is a manifestation of spiritual or demonic possession, although Chi did not hold the belief and did not think much of it, cruelly dismissing it as bullshit. 3 days before trial, the prosecutor and his investigator interviewed Chi. Chi referenced demons when discussing Yang's claim to have had a seizure. He said Yang told him that there was a good demon at the front of the house and a bad demon at the back of the house. Yang said that the demon made her kill Mirabelle. Chi spoke to Yang again the next day and she told him again, "A demon made me do this." Chi explained in the interview that Yang was saying she had a seizure and at the point the demon took over her body and made her do what she did. Chua, the mother, testified at trial that Yang's references to a spirit or demon were related to things Yang's brother Cao had told her. Yang told Chua she did not want her to repeat what Cao had told her about the house being built on a cemetery, or about a ghost that was watching her and was going to take the kids and take her for fear of appearing crazy. On a separate note, if I was going to buy a house and I found out it was on a cemetery, I ain't buying that shit. Now, in an April 2011 interview with an employee from Child Protective Services, Yang again said she was sitting with Mirabelle, went blank while working at the computer, and woke up in bed with the baby. The employee testified that Yang said that she had seen a black shadow moving around her house, but did not clarify the date and time of the sighting, and the employee did not ask any follow up questions. The employee did not ask whether the sighting was before or after the baby's death or any other specifics. Now, at trial, experts testifying for the prosecution and defense testified the convulsive portion of a generalized tonic clonic seizure is typically between 1 and 2 minutes. And other experts, they could be between 45 seconds to 2 minutes. A person can have more than one type of seizure as part of their epilepsy, but their epilepsy does not change over time, and a person tends to have the same types of seizures over time. A person who consistently experiences generalized onset seizures is not going to experience partial seizures, which are caused by a different kind of epilepsy. But it is possible, although not common, to suffer from both types. The type of epilepsy a person has is often determined by relying on people who have observed the person's seizures. After most seizures, the person enters into a recovery period known as postictal stage. If the seizure resulted in a loss of contact with the environment or complete unconsciousness, the person remains comatose or close to comatose while gradually regaining consciousness. You see, Dr. David Treeman, a neurologist with a specialty in epilepsy, testified as a prosecution witness. Based on his review of Yang's medical history, Dr. Treeman concluded Yang's seizures are always generalized onset, resulting in her falling to the ground, exhibiting bilateral extremity movement and tonic clonic activity, followed by at least a 10 to 20 or maybe a 30-minute postictal period. He had only seen tongue biting with tonic clonic seizures, not complex partial seizures. He would not assume that her seizures would change from her typical seizure, and he saw nothing to suggest that Yang experienced any other kind of seizure before this incident. When initially asked by the district attorney's office to evaluate the case, Dr. Treeman had said that it was possible that Yang had a seizure and was in an unconscious state when she put Mirabelle in the microwave. He advised the district attorney's office should not prosecute for murder, enough probability exists that she may have had a seizure. However, Dr. Treeman later further refined his opinion based on close attention to the precise timeline. At trial, he concluded it would not be medically supported to claim that Yang, given her medical history, could have made a complex entry into a computer at 1:58 p.m., had a seizure, put the baby in the microwave in a confused state, punched a series of complex numbers, brought the baby to Chua at 2:09 p.m., asked a coherent question about her baby, and been in a state of full and complete recovery by 2:10 p.m. to 2:12 p.m., such that no one noticed that she was in a postictal state. Rather, Dr. Treeman would have expected Yang to still be on the ground around 5 to 10 minutes after the seizure, and she would be experiencing confusion for 20 to 30 minutes after the seizure. Now we have Dr. Paul Garcia, a neurologist, testified for the defense after originally having been hired by the prosecution. Dr. Garcia reviewed Yang's medical records, and he said that Yang had a history of all three kinds of seizures, but that only the tonic clonic seizures were reported by people who had witnessed her seizures. Dr. Garcia testified detectives told him that they saw an injury at the side of Yang's tongue, and he noted biting the side of the tongue is most commonly associated with a partial seizure that does not become a tonic clonic seizure. Additionally, Dr. Garcia observed Yang's medical records, including a prior normal EEG, and the fact that her medication did not suppress her seizures suggested she suffered from partial seizures. Dr. Philip Resnick, a physician specializing in psychiatry, testified for the defense. His research identified 5 reasons why a mother would take her child's life. Number 1, an unwanted child. Number 2, revenge against the spouse. Number 3, overzealous discipline. Number 4, altruism, essentially saving a child from a fate worse than death. And number 5, acute psychotic or postictal state without comprehensible motive. Dr. Resnick interviewed Yang and her family members, and he reviewed the police reports and Yang's records. He testified there was no evidence that Yang took Mirabelle's life because she was an unwanted child, to take revenge against she due to overzealous discipline, or as misplaced altruism. Dr. Resnick testified that Yang's medical records and interviews with her family did not suggest she had experienced symptoms of depression before the killing. She denied auditory and visual hallucinations to the police and in his interview with her. He observed she had never experienced any delusional beliefs, experienced any hallucinations, or had any history of mental illness. When asked about undiagnosed postpartum psychosis, Dr. Resnick emphasized that postpartum psychosis is really quite dramatic and is not something that goes unnoticed. Those who suffer from that affliction are very, very sick. He added that transcripts of Yang interviewing with detectives show no evidence of postpartum psychosis and confirmed that seeing her baby's eyes moving back and forth and possibly seeing a man looking through the window would not be examples of paranoia. So on December the 18th, 2015, Ka Yang was sentenced 25 years to life in prison. Up until this point of the story, is the 25 years correct? Should she have gotten life, or do you think she was not guilty by reason of insanity? Let me know. However, in July of 2021, acting presiding Justice Elena Duarte of the Third Appeal of the District of the State of California reversed Yang's first degree murder conviction. She wrote that the expert testimony about postpartum depression was not harmless error and was improperly admitted because it included medical records not directly related to relevant medical issues. The reason for the appeals court's reversal of the murder verdict relates to the expert testimony of prosecution witnesses. Even though the trial court had ruled that Yang's psychological records were privileged, the prosecutor announced that he had reviewed them prior to cross examination of one of Yang's expert witnesses. The prosecutor sought and received permission to go into the psych records, including key testimony by Dr. Angela Vickers, Mirabel's pediatrician, who gave a lengthy explanation of postpartum depression, although she had no special training in psychiatry or psychology and was admittedly not qualified to render an opinion regarding postpartum depression or psychosis. Vickers also failed to testify that she saw any actual evidence of postpartum disorders in Yang, especially since she actually screened her and found her to be negative for postpartum disorders after Mirabel's death. Instead, her testimony was full of descriptions of generalized risk factors and statistics. After reviewing key components of the trial, the appellate court agreed the trial court abused its discretion by admitting the challenged testimony. The trial court had improperly admitted evidence of diminished capacity, and that evidence of postpartum depression is not proper motive, and that the risk factor evidence constituted a criminal profile, and that the testimony contained improper statistical evidence. The conclusion I can come to regarding this story is I don't know. I mean, if she had seizures beginning at the age of 13, well, her saying she had a seizure at the time makes sense. Her family history does not suggest that she was depressed. She had the perfect support system. So I don't know how to conclude. I'm obviously not an expert. So being in our position, sometimes it's not really about the details. Sometimes it's about how does it make you feel? And the microwave is just peculiar. We've all seen true crime stories, right? Knives, guns, sexual assault, whatever you want to call it. Microwave? That's very specific. That's very peculiar. Like, who puts their child in a microwave? And as deranged as that sounds, maybe that is a deliberate act. Again, because it's so specific and peculiar. You understand what I'm saying? I can't even imagine how the child must have been feeling in that position. I don't think Ka Yang did this on purpose, and I am a true believer in postpartum depression and its effect and how bad it can be. But then again, nothing would suggest that she was alone during this period. And being alone during postpartum depression is the worst thing for any woman. So again, you guys know I'm a fraud, so I don't know. Comment, tell me what you think.